And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to thoughtbot's live coding stream. If you've been following along, you know that I am in the process of upgrading a Rails 3.2 application to Rails 7. We're currently at Rails 4.2 and have some deprecations and errors to fix. And along the way, I've been joined by different people across the thoughtbot team. And today I am joined by Joe and Akshith. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll let you two introduce yourselves.
I can go first. I'm Joe Ferris. I'm the CTO at thoughtbot. Also the acting director of software development for Mission Control, which is our platform engineering team. And I'm pretty sure that I wrote this application that we're upgrading like 10 years ago.
Someone was like in the first or second stream, someone said, "Where's Joe? Is Joe still at that?" And I said, "Yes, I have to get him on the stream so he can go through this pain with
Yes. I don't remember the application, so I think it'll be a just punishment.
Yeah, Akshith.
Hey, yeah, my name's Akshith Yellapragada. I am the development team lead on Mission Control. I did not write this application, and I haven't done Rails in a long time. I don't know why I volunteered for this, but I'm still happy to be here.
It'll be fine. Because the version of Rails we're using is probably one that you used a while ago. So I want to say hello to our Twitch viewers, if there are any. We are now simulcasting for the first time, both on YouTube and Twitch. If you have comments, questions along the way, just drop them in the chat and we'll see them. And as a reminder, thoughtbot is available to upgrade your Rails application, create a new application, maintain or improve your existing application. And like Joe and Akshith said, we also have a mission control team, which does infrastructure, DevOps, and site reliability engineering. So let's dive in. We have our spec failures here. And I mentioned that we're getting the failures are all around missing template for an existing mailer. And then we've got a bunch of deliver deprecation warnings. It's not gone in 4.2, but it is going to go away in Rails 5 is what it tells us. So we're going to need to change those to either deliver now or deliver later to deliver through active job. So if you remember, which you've already said you don't remember, this application is a survey application, a survey builder and taker application. So you can build surveys with questions and different question types, multiple choice questions, fill in the box questions. And then people can go to the survey and fill it out. That's what the application is.
And sounds familiar.
Yeah. So let's go to, all of these failures are the same. So let's go see what it's about. Let's just take a look at the spec here. So we have invite, and the spec is saying that when we invite, it has an object here called survey inviter. And when we call the invite on that, the invitation count should equal 1, and the last delivery of the email should have the body text with the message in it. And the failure we're getting is that there's a missing template for the mailer. So mailer invitation notification is missing. So let's just see whether that's there, right?
Quick question. Are they supposed to see VS Code?
Thanks.
Okay.
There we go. There it is. Sorry.
Cool.
Thanks actually. So we have, like I was saying, the survey inviter, which you can call invite on, and invitation count should be 1, and then we're checking the deliveries. So there should be, what it's looking for is a mailer invitation notification template. And it's not coming up with anything. So
Does it make sense for us to look at the actual mailer?
Yeah, I was gonna look at, yeah, it does. Deliver notification, deliver invitations, invitation, deliver. So it's doing dependency injection, which is sort of the point of, if I remember right, the examples in Ruby Science, which is what this application is from, is demonstrating some dependency injection. So that's why it's passing in the mailer to use. So I guess the mailer to use was the unsubscribable mailer. And then it's just the mailer invitation notification.
Oh, it gives it a body. That's why the template isn't there. It's expecting to use the body and not render a template, I think.
Yeah, that's what it looks like, huh? And when it called the invitation notification, that came from there. And where did the body?
I saw it in the invitation class. It built a body. Body equals invitation message new dot body. So I think we're passing in body. I wonder if the arguments for action mailer change, so there's some other way of telling it we want to use a string instead of a template.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it looks like. So let's bring up the, oh wait, I keep on going to dash because it's muscle memory, but I remember what we really need to do is the Rails APIs.
We're on Rails 4 now,
yes,
right?
I know. I the last time I'm looking for the switcher. Rails 7.1 came out, and it looks like this layout. Rails 7 came out like 2 hours ago, and it looks like this layout changed. Let me just double check the version that we're 4.2.11. Okay. So let me make this a little bigger.
Doesn't look like it takes a body.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it takes a body. If you do not pass a block to the mail method, it will find all templates in the view paths used by using the default mailer name. So maybe giving a block. There are two ways to call this method: with a block or without a block, except a headers hash. Where does it say what happens if you pass a block? says if you do not pass a block.
If you do pass a block, you can render
Oh.
specific templates.
Oh, okay. So we can say this with that body.
Yeah, I think that we don't know for sure if it's a plain text body, but I think it's a safe guess.
Let's just double check and see. Invitation message. Oh. So it is rendering the templates itself. And it's not. It's just an HTML. And it's just HTML.
Because I hadn't started using Mutt yet when I wrote this.
Hadn't started using what?
Mutt.
Oh, yeah.
Plain text mail client.
Okay, so we're going to get rid of passing in. So for some, I reloaded right before we started and Vim bindings aren't enabled, which is.
That's great.
So I wonder if we need to call HTML safe on the body.
Yeah, I don't know if the result from action view render will include an HTML safe string. Probably, right?
Yeah.
I think you need to accept the format argument in the block.
None of my extensions are enabled, so we're gonna fix it, but I'm just manually running the spec now. What were you saying, Joe, about the block?
In the so we do format, but format is not defined. I think format should be the block argument.
It didn't complain about that specifically. It did error, but it looks like it's calling a different format method.
Wonder if there's also a format method on Action Mailer. That's an exciting twist.
It's nil, which, valid params. Yeah, this is all stubbed out. So it is, I think probably in this spec, it is actually nil. Well, it should be rendering the template, shouldn't it? And it expects to have the message in the body.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's subbing out the template.
Okay. So I'm just gonna because it's gonna drive me crazy if I don't. And then okay, so, well, I should say out loud what I was doing. I was enabling the Vim extension so that I have Vim bindings now, and the Rails run spec so that I can run specs based on the line I'm on. If you use Visual Studio Code and you don't do, well, Vim bindings, you can do whatever you want, but I really recommend that in your editor, you be able to quickly run the specs directly from the line, just focused on the line that you're Okay. So it's nil, and so we think it's not actually rendering that template.
Would that be nil, or would that be an empty string? It's still rendering a template.
Yeah, but we expect it to have the message, so this spec is definitely not expecting it to be an empty string or nil.
Is there a stub for any of these dependent classes like invitation or mailer lower down? Like I don't see any stubbing going on. I just see valid.
Not in this spec. In this one, there's a little bit.
And there's a quick question in chat about the like running your tests from how you actually did that.
Yeah. So, So Mina is answering Clarissa's question. Go to spec extension. The one I use is called Rails Run Specs. So, and then what that does is it gives you a keyboard shortcut. And in the case for me, it's Control Command L is going to run the specs for the spec around that specific line that I'm on. You can run Control Command T to run all the tests, and then Control Command F, I think, to run the ones for just that file. Okay, so survey inviter is the top level object that we have, and we're calling the invite method on that. And if it's valid, then we're going to deliver the notifications. So one possible failure here is if it's not valid.
But it does seem like in the backtrace, it's getting into the mailer. So it's trying to deliver the notifications.
Okay, yeah, you're right. That's right. Okay, so it's trying to do that. So it's getting to deliver notifications. And then for each one, it is calling deliver on it, which is happening right there. And it's passing in the unsubscribable mailer, but it is getting to the mailer. So I'm just going to print out what body we have here just to see if we have anything at that point.
In VS Code for Ruby, do breakpoints work for the debugger?
Yes. So some people were talking on previous streams about how the fact that I was doing puts debugging, and it's just the workflow that I have, and it's so ingrained that I forget about the debugger sometimes.
But the debugger can be hard to use in Ruby with there are so many levels of abstraction. As you start stepping into things, you can get lost so quickly in metaprogramming. But I think there are some situations where it's useful.
Trying to find local variable method debugger. I might not have it enabled in this app. Well, the body there was nil, by the way. So if we go to invitation message, I'm curious whether the specs for this pass, because there's a spec for rendering the template. So if you notice, we're running this, and the specs are a little bit slow. I wrote a blog post about that. It went live, I guess, yesterday. Everything you see here in terms of running Ruby is actually running fully emulated x86 64 instance on a new Apple Silicon Mac, because the version of Ruby that this application is on can't yet be upgraded to a version that works on Apple Silicon. So everything is being emulated. It's actually surprisingly usable given a fully emulated x86 instance. So this also failed. So it expected nil to include hello, but doesn't. But it's nothing. So this is good. We should actually probably focus on this spec first, because it's more focused to the actual problem of rendering the template, which seems to not be working.
This is one of those things that does seem to change often between Rails upgrades, is rendering a template outside of a controller.
Yeah, exactly. So what are we doing here? We are including abstract controller rendering. We're including the routes, helpers. Okay, so what is usually a good guide here is we went from Rails 4 to 4.2. We attempted to skip 4.1 in our haste, and as I've been hammering home each step of the way, or in each of these things, like, we really do want to take as small steps as possible, but I went from 4.0 to 4.2 in the hope that it would be relatively straightforward. So what I'm looking for is the upgrading guide to
And the specs passed on 4.0.
Yeah. So let's just the word rendering doesn't appear anywhere. Okay, let's just check the 4.2. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and if either of you have any ideas, definitely chime in. I was just going to Google for Rails 4.2 rendering template in model.
One thought I had was that there is some machinery in our spec that stubs out view rendering, at least when you're doing a controller spec. Is it possible that it's just because we're in the specs, it's not actually rendering the view? Like, it's interesting to me that it just returns nil. It doesn't even
it doesn't error.
Yeah.
How would we check that?
That would actually be an interesting case for a debugger, is if we set a breakpoint here, we can step into render and see where it goes.
Okay, so we want to add pry.
I don't remember this by bug, but I don't know where in the chronology of Ruby versions that is.
Let's try it, and
it might be by without the underscore. It's like by one thing.
Oh yeah,
I think so.
Okay. Well, while that runs, let's. Yeah.
The other thought I had is it possible that render does not return something and it's actually it's mutating the object that calls render instead? An actual
This
Rails
render
controller,
doesn't
it
call
doesn't.
anything, you think?
Well, it doesn't
You're
return
saying?
anything, right? Like if you're in a Rails controller, when you call render, you don't expect that to be the return value. It sets the body on the response.
Right. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
can we?
Normalize arguments, options, and then delegates render to body is what that document says right there.
And it says sticks the result in self.response body.
So I know that there's render to string as well. Oh, that went away or moved.
Could you hypothetically test that by just returning an empty string and seeing if we get that instead of nil? Like after the render, I guess it doesn't matter, but like having body return something.
You want to know if, like, you want to verify that it's render that's returning nil?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've done that. I've added this is a test, which is being returned by body now. And so yeah, expected this is a test to include hello, and it didn't. So that confirms that nothing, that nil is being returned from this.
And it doesn't error, it just returns nil.
Right. So let's try render to string, which is raw rendering of a template to a string. It's similar to render, except that it does not set the response body, and it should be guaranteed to always return a string. It's curious that this was, to me, that this was working
I was thinking the same
previously.
thing.
It must be that in 4.0 render still returned something. Oh, okay.
It said it should be guaranteed to return a string. It doesn't say it is guaranteed.
Yeah.
If it, yeah, it's weird because you're right. It doesn't error out, but could that be the one situation or a situation where it doesn't give us anything? Like if we did render a string with a string or something, could we confirm if the template part is working correctly?
Render to string. What are you suggesting, Akshith? You want to drive?
I don't actually know exactly what we would be doing, but I'm wondering if the template invitations message part is erroring or having something invalid happen, which means that render to string is not giving us anything.
Mm-hmm.
But
Still just doesn't do anything.
It didn't do anything.
So that, it could be that it's stubbed out from our spec.
Yeah. That actually. Our spec stub render. Yeah, this is ringing a bell to me now. How do we tell our there's a syntax, if I remember right, for telling our spec to render the templates.
Yeah, in controller specs, there's a setting. What kind of spec is this that we're? Is it just a straight up?
This is a model. Survey inviter is a model.
But we were looking at invitation message before.
Yeah, you're right.
Invitation
message is
regular spec.
Actually, it descends from abstract controller.
Right, but the invitation, like, I guess, does our spec do some magic to know that that's a controller spec? There used to be a lot of inference. These days, things are usually more explicit, like you R spec type controller, but
yeah. Actually, instead of telling RSpec not rendering template.
doing a Google search, there is, or at least used to be, a message render underscore views in controller specs.
Yes, that sounds that. So here, do we put it just here?
I think it was just the top level of spec.
Yeah, I think the Stack Overflow one you had an example. I think you could do it. Yeah, that first one, the top, the one answer. If you, I know it's like right above the top level, or it was at the top level.
Well, let's see if that works. The thing is that we didn't upgrade our spec yet. So to have the difference between the two versions without an RSpec change is interesting to me.
Yeah, we're not in a controller spec.
Yeah, but failed to load command RSpec. That's interesting.
It was a missing error for render views.
Yeah.
How hard is it to actually make this application run locally? Like, one thing we could do is to test the RSpec or not RSpec thesis. We could see if you're actually running the app, does it render template?
That's a good question. I hadn't set up the port forwarding. So we can forward a port.
You could also try Rails console.
Yeah.
Because this is a it's a Ruby class. You could make a new invitation message and call body on it.
Mm-hmm. need to give it a invitation.
It looks like in the stream, the very bottom of your window is cut off.
Thanks, Joe. Is invitation, do you remember, is it active model?
I don't know.
Model? Okay, it's a real one.
It's an active record class.
Let's just try this. Invitation. Well,
okay. So I think that kills the RSpec thesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we do the change that we did again previously really quickly and just confirm? Like if we give it an empty string or something and we do this again here, then we can just confirm that the problem is here.
Like that?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Okay.
Can we inspect the invitation message itself? I guess it's just showing us the invitation, but it inherits abstract controller base. Like it must have some other methods and state on it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's very determined to return nil.
I want it's from 4.0 to 4.2. It seems weird that this rendering thing would totally change.
Can we try? So we're specifying the template. Can we try removing the template part and just giving it the name?
I'm pretty sure that the syntax is that, or is template.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Well, let's go back to Google here and because Rails 4.2 render template in model. Because you're right, Joe, this has changed quite a bit. So this is the Rails 4.2 guides. This looks to be all about doing it in a controller.
It's typically how you do it.
Yes, it is typically where you do it. It's funny to me that it's not saying it can't find the template. It's not.
Yeah, it's like we have it's like we don't actually have the method.
Right. Okay, this. Oh, congratulations. I won. Okay, I'm going to. So the problem is I don't have any example Rails applications that are as old as this one. But let's just look.
I have another thought while we do this as well. Are we passing anything in to that template? Okay, or is that template using any local variables? Or like implicitly passing something in?
That's a good question.
It references the invitation in the template.
I wonder if we explicitly pass it in with the locals key and then we give that template, like we remove the instance variables.
Wouldn't you expect it to crash though and not just return nil?
Right.
Yes, but this feels like a strange enough situation.
Okay, so when was this published? 2015. So it's generally around the time that we're talking about here. Rails 3. Yeah, so this is let's try doing this. And I'm not going to set the local variable, but whoops. Okay, rendered invitations message, undefined sender for nil class in the template. So that and then was it locals? Yeah. And then Did I miss something? Undefined method email for no class.
The sender,
Oh,
is you're making a new invitation with no state.
mm-hmm.
I'd be curious to see if the spec runs differently now.
Let's give it a try. Yeah, because I was giving a new invitation where I hadn't set up the sender at all. That's what you're saying.
In my Googling, I did see that this completely changed again in Rails 5, so we'll get to do this again next episode.
Undefined method host for nil class.
That's probably trying to do the URL.
Yep.
This is another thing that changes frequently between Rails upgrades is how do you use the routes outside? Actually,
I think that there's a way to pass it in. So it says here that it's passed into. Yeah, this is how I've been doing it recently.
Does this answer mention a Rails version?
Nope. Rails 5. That's funny.
It is much easier now, so eventually this will be straightforward.
We're on the path to easy. Well, what do we want to try?
What if you try setting application controller default URL options? I don't think that's a good idea, but I think that's probably what it's looking for.
Don't we do a similar thing on line 6? I mean, I guess it's not application controller, but would it?
Right, that's setting it on self. So previously it was getting the invitation and the URL options and view paths from this instance because we were calling self.render, but now we're calling class method render to string.
Gotcha. Yep.
Let's see if that works.
Nope.
Okay, well, we could try.
Can we see what the default URL options are? It seems like it's nil.
Yeah, it does look to me like it's nil.
And either it wasn't nil before or it was okay for it to be nil.
The I like how it's like comment after comment. Well, here's how you do it in Rails 5. Here's how you do it in Rails 6. But no one's saying how you do it in Rails 4. Undefined method host for no class. And then...
Oh, no, it's not now. You see just above the F host example.com.
Right. Yeah, it's right here. So it's not nil.
Not on controller.
But it's
nil
an
somewhere.
undefined method host for a nil class. And that is...
Oh, I wonder if it's looking on the request, and the request is nil. You might have to give it a -B to get more of the backtrace.
I can do that.
It's going to be deep in some URL helper somewhere. Getting to the 0 vote answers there. Action controller metal URL for.
Yeah, so it's doing... It's basically doing what you said, which is it's calling it on the request.host.
Which makes sense if you're using a controller.
Right. So this is URL options.
Can you set URL options versus default URL options?
Yeah, we can try. We can try, Joe. So the what I was looking to see was, so now the way that I would do it is pass it in as a option to renderer.
That looks nice. I wish we could do that.
Yeah, undefined method URL options equals. Well, we could try it. I just don't think it's going to work.
No, I think you're right. I think it's new in Rails 5. It's funny. I think part of the point of this section in the book was showing how you can do views outside of a Rails controller action, because it used to be hard.
And it is.
It is in this version, but by the time we finish upgrading, the chapter will be very boring because you just use the renderer. Can we see the URL for file again?
Yeah.
Trying to decide if it'd be easier to try and convince this controller that there's a request, or if there's a different object we should be using that doesn't expect a request. All options. So unless request is set or URL options is already set, it's going to fail.
So we can... That's not going to be what we want. So renderer was released when did you think?
Rails 5.
I noticed that there's an example here of doing it with action view.
I think I did find why it returns nil. I don't know that it helps us at all. Oh, I can't comment in this chat. How do I give you a URL?
You can paste it in tuple. You can paste it in tuple.
You can also just read it out loud, and we'll type really quickly.
It's a very long URL.
You should be able to paste it.
Let's see. Nope. I can type, but I don't seem to be able to paste.
Hold on one. Nope. Are you in the private chat, or just are you in the private chat?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think it's important enough.
Okay, fine. So at this stage of like doing this, what I might do is, we've been banging on this for a little while. I might look at the specs and pick another one to try to work on. But in this case, we know that all of the specs have to do with mailers. All the spec failures that we're getting have to do with mailers. So I don't think that there's another good option, but I just wanted to call that out. Like at this stage of a Rails upgrade where you're working on one issue, it's been an hour, it might be better to switch to something else, but I don't think there is anything in this case for us to switch to.
The other thing you could consider is doing a Rails 4.1 upgrade just to see.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent enough time at this. Should we put this back to the way that it was?
It was working in Rails 4.0.
Right. Okay, yeah, let's... What was the thing we changed? Is there anything we changed that we don't want to lose? This block format is going to be necessary.
But we don't actually know.
That's true.
The error has been the same the whole time.
Okay, I'm just going to stash this. Okay. And I'm looking up the... what I like to do is get the last point release of Rails for the version that we're going to. 4.1.16. pretty sure we didn't, when we went to 4.2, we didn't have to deal with any gem things, but it was a few days ago now, so not 100% sure of that. So it's changing from 4.2 to 4.1. Okay, that's what I expected. Now let's just
make us feel bad about ourselves.
Go ahead and run that spec that was failing before and see whether it passes now.
What will be really fun is if it's totally different in this version and not the same as 4.2. Okay, it's pretty similar though.
This seems good.
Well, good and good is all relative. It seems like it's the same problem.
Yeah, I guess compared to being completely different, and then we have to do both problems.
Do we want to stay on 4.1 or do we want to go back to 4.2?
I think 4.2.
Okay.
Since we didn't learn anything by going to 4.1.
Oh, I never committed though. I stashed without. Wait, no, why did it?
I think you need to check out the gem file changes first.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Rails 5. Let's just try. Oh. Oh, we have a typo here. It's not gonna. That's weird. That wasn't what I expected. So wrong number of arguments, 0 for 1. oh, sorry, 1 for 0. Okay, so this in this version of Rails doesn't take any. And then we are renderer, and we're pretty sure this method is not there in 4.2.
There is an action view renderer in this version of Rails. I was just looking through the code, and it looks like in abstract controller renderer, render to body in Rails 4.0 uses action view renderer. Render to body in Rails 4.2 is an empty method, which must get overridden somewhere.
Right.
But there's action view renderer, which used to be used by that, so maybe we want to try and use that.
What's the syntax, Joe? This right here? Is it something like this? You're muted.
I'm going to change my middle name to You're Muted.
Okay.
There is a class action view : renderer.
Here, you want to type or?
I've figured out how to give you a URL.
Okay.
It should be in the private chat. Now you can see what I'm looking at. So this is how it worked in Rails 4.0.
Mm-hmm.
Is it would end up calling this.
Okay, so that is similar to what was over here. So the lookup context.
You might have a lookup context in the class you're in, since it extends from action controller base.
Renderer. And in theory, what I'm so then we shouldn't need to set this. So do we need to, potentially the lookup context is using default URL options?
I don't think it is.
So we should need to set it somehow.
Yeah, if we make a new object
Undefined
somehow.
method render to string on action view renderer. Did we expect it to have?
Render body, render template.
I don't think we need to do that anymore because action view renderer returns an HTML string.
I think we can just call it render.
Yeah. This whole thing is, this whole journey has been like a sort of a trip down memory lane where it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was annoying, or that was different, or whatever. Okay, wrong number of arguments, 1 for 2. So we're just passing in the hash there. Context and then options. What is that context? It's not the lookup context. Does render template take the same thing? Yeah, it does.
We wouldn't see an example of the context here because it's being passed in whenever it gets called. So if we go back to the previous file where we actually use action view renderer, would we? No, I mean we have lookup context.
What? Yeah, I'm just wondering what the context actually is.
It is a view context. So another class.
Okay, action view context.
You might have that as a method in this class, just view underscore context. I bet there's like a 5-character change we could make to this file that would have made it work. But figuring out, there's like an extra class you need to include or something.
Right. Yeah, because in theory, abstract controller rendering is there. Okay, so it's not view context.
That's interesting. It is there in Rails 4.0. But it's gone in Rails 4.2. It must have moved somewhere. We just need to include the thing where it moved. What if you include, instead of abstract controller rendering, what is this? Action controller metal rendering? Oh, it looks like it's just action controller rendering. The file is metal, but yeah, that's. And then we put it back like it was.
Back to
just render template invitations message.
You're talking about this?
Yeah.
And that's not going to render to the body?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
This is a class I found in Rails 4.2.
It's just hanging around there, waiting to be used.
Or not.
Or not.
Oh, undefined method view paths. Okay. I wonder if we need both. Abstract controller and action controller.
Undefined method content type for invitation message. That is very different from an error message that we've been getting.
Yes.
Was it text HTML? I just want to, I doubt this is going to work. I just want to see what it's going to do. Well, we now have a space in an empty string with no actual error from the code. So we could go back to render to string and see if that does the same thing. Did we, when we were at this stage before, was render to string defined at this level?
I think it was, and it returned to nil instead of a string. Now we have a single space instead of nil.
So it's not erroring. It's not complaining about the, oh, we're not setting locals anymore. And did I ditch that change? Yeah, there's not an instance variable there. Absolutely no change. Great.
What's also interesting is if that was related to the problem, like the empty space doesn't come from the partial either. Like that's like the very first thing where it would break.
Right. Okay, so the closest we got to working was by using application controller dot new, right?
I have one other idea before we go back to that.
Okay.
Instead of including these other two things, abstract controller and action controller, can we try including action view rendering?
Okay. Like that?
Yes.
I'm eventually going to rig it up so that when the specs are running, music plays automatically or something.
Jeopardy song.
Yeah. Undefined method render to string.
What about just render?
Well, part of define method render.
Okay.
Yeah.
One last idea. What if you include abstract controller rendering and action view rendering?
Okay. Should one be before the other?
I think action view rendering should be second, because that one has the empty method. You're gonna need some mix-ins.
I don't think this is gonna work, Joe. I just have
If you
to-
mix in enough modules, it'll work. Mix it more.
Oh, man.
Oh,
The one time I said I don't think it's gonna work, and of course it worked. Actually, whatever. I guess it worked.
so the way I found that was I
Yeah.
checked out that version of Rails locally, and I searched for the method that was empty, render to body, which used to be there in Rails 4.0, and just
Mhm.
found all the different things that defined it. So those modules I randomly threw at it were all the places we defined that method, and eventually the right mix of mix-ins. gets
Okay.
a couple. And then we can delete it all for Rails 5.
So what did we? So, well,
That was the only change.
no. Well, we needed to also change how we were rendering the.
Did we though?
Yeah, because the mailer used to take a body key, and now it doesn't. It takes the formats.
Okay. I can't remember if we ever tried
Oh,
running
I
it with
also
the body key, but not.
let's try removing this content type setting and see if it still complains about that. And Rails 4.2, I feel like Rails didn't fully acknowledge that rendering templates outside of controllers was like a valid thing. And so it's not documented.
That method does have a little comment on it that says API public,
Oh, really?
but it is an empty method. So
Okay. So I removed the content type, and that is passing. So do you want? Oh, I'm pretty confident that this is. We looked up the documentation in Rails 4.2 for how to call, and the documentation had changed, and this was the way to do it.
definitely works. The one thing I'd be curious about is if you need the HTML safe.
Right. We're not going to be able to. The reason why I'm printing it out is because we're just matching on whether the message is included in there, and so we're not going to be able to tell whether the entities are escaped or not. And what we want to see is the entities not escaped, right?
The escaping would happen after that point, though.
Oh.
Like body is going to be a string either way, and it either has the magic HTML safe thing on it or it doesn't, and then render will either escape it or not. So you'd need to see the result of.
So we want to actually put it in the spec then.
Yeah, I think so.
Hey, Stephanie. Stephanie, who was on the stream with me last time, is in the chat. Okay, so it is not escaped, which is what we want, right?
Yeah, that's what you'd expect, right? Because we're telling it to render HTML, so the string should be HTML safe.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we remove by bug?
Goodbye, bye bug.
Did we use it?
We never used
once.
it. We hardly knew ye. Bye bug. Goodbye. Okay, so we have that change and that change. I experienced the same thing in Nano that someone experiences when Vim comes up as the editor. It's like complete discombobulation of what to do, even though it's so.
Yeah, I always panic and hit every variation of Control C and escape that I can.
Okay, so let's rake completely and see whether that fixed all of the problems or not. I'm guessing no, but it should have fixed at least 2 of them.
Seems like Rails 5 was the version where it got to the point where they had classes you could instantiate, like renderer, and it made a big difference. Like it's much easier than just randomly mixing in modules until something works.
Yeah. Well, and I think inherent in that was like the recognition that you sometimes want to do things that are outside of the normal context.
Yeah, I think having all those things composed of usable objects instead of just class methods you mix in makes it much more straightforward to understand where you are. Like trying to figure out which mixin it's in the code is much harder than just looking at the object and seeing what methods it has.
So we had complete success. So now we just have the deprecation warnings for delivery, or for deliver. There are null. Oh, that's the message. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm looking to see whether I can do a global find and replace, and I actually don't think I can. There's too much going on that is not directly matching that. So for this becomes deliver now. Well, it could also become deliver later, but I don't know what the status is at this point of like active job and stuff.
Well, I think if you're doing a straight upgrade, you'd want to do deliver now, because deliver literally was deliver now previously.
Yeah. Now, do we want this deliver method is taking a mailer. It's not the actual mailer deliver method. So we don't need to rename it, but maybe that's a question for understandability, whether they should be named the same thing or not. I don't know if either.
I think it probably makes sense to leave it as deliver.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of an implementation details, whether it happens now or later.
So this is not an actual mailer. And the invitation notification method is calling deliver, but null message has it. So this needs to be deliver now, so that both the real mailer and the null mailer have deliver now.
You might not be able to see I'm nodding vigorously.
Okay.
I think that stub might need to change, right? Or was that on the invitation?
This is on the, this one is on the invitation. Was there another one that
on the previous
right
one?
Yep.
Yep.
You're right. This one changes to deliver now. This one's on invitation. All right, let's run our specs and see whether that. So while this is running, I just have to like, this is, just reinforcing like, this is becoming a real slog to go through. This isn't even that big of an application. It's a fairly real world one, as in it came from our real world work, but it's not even that big of an application. And to go from one version to another, from 3.2, we've only made it to 4.2, which admittedly is like through 3 Rails versions, but it's becoming a real slog. It's a good illustration of why you really do need to stay up to date with Rails applications. Otherwise, when you get out of date, it's going to take weeks to upgrade. Either that or, Sarah and I, when we were deciding, there's another strategy, which was basically, I wouldn't go from 3.2 to Rails 7 and in one leap, but there is a strategy where you basically generate a new Rails 7 application and then go through and copy the models into it, go through the whole application and copy stuff into the Rails 7 application. But you end up with a broken, that's a really risky move as well. So yeah, Dave is in the chat is saying, I think it will be less of a slog once you get to 5. That's what I'm hoping. The other thing is once we get to 5, I believe once we get to 5, maybe 6, I'll be able to move out of the emulator for the Ruby version, and that'll speed up the cycle of running the specs, and that'll make things go a little bit faster. So it looks like that got rid of all the deliver node deprecations, which is good. We're still getting these, which are coming from the Capybara RSpec matchers. So that's not in our code. That is in the in that, but at some point we might want to address those. And then I see we have another deprecation warning here. Serve static assets has been renamed to serve static files to clarify its role. It will be removed in 5.0. Please migrate your configuration accordingly. So this is just saying that it wants to be files instead. But what I was in part gonna get to was like it's feeling like a real slog here now, and faced with this, I can tell I'm tempted to just be like, you know what, forget it. Let's just increment to Rails 6, and I just know in my heart that if I do that, so much stuff would be broken, it would turn even to a worse situation because the surface area of those changes would be ridiculous. Okay, so that got rid of that deprecation from Rails. We've had this deprecation for a little while now. So we are our spec helper is doing this. I just want to see, I'm pretty sure we can just remove it now. Yep, cool. Oh, that also got rid of the other thing about the IO object for deprecations already being initialized. Let's run one more rake. So while this is running, I'll just, I am in the mode now, embracing, okay, I want to get this done. So we are on the stream until 5 p.m. today, so about an hour and 15 minutes. And, oh, we got some failures. Thank you, Dave. Joe, Dave is praising Ruby Science. And that's part of why we want to get this done, is because part of updating Ruby Science is also making Ruby Science available in an indexable, readable way on the web. And that's part of why we're doing this. So we want to make that amazing resource available for everybody. So we are going to be back on from in US Eastern Time, 9 to noon tomorrow, with a great group of people from different time zones, Europe, West Asia, and Africa, thoughtbot team members in those time zones. So I'm going to be pairing with them on this. And then it's not scheduled yet, but if we don't finish, then I'm going to be back on at 2 p.m. Tomorrow as well, and go from 2 to 5 p.m. again tomorrow. So we basically have all day tomorrow. I really am going to push to get it done this week so that we can see so that we can finally get this released. Okay, so these failures are caused by the changes I just made. It's interesting. These were the deprecation errors, and now they're failures. I wonder if it was the change to removing RSpec auto run that did that.
It's the only thing
Yeah.
that seems like it could have.
Well, that's okay. That's interesting that those are failures now. I should really just run one of them. So what we need to do to get rid of this deprecation is upgrade the email specs gem. Part of why part of why I'm drawn towards getting rid of these deprecations now is because they've been here across 2 different Rails versions. And so I'm getting worried that if we don't resolve them with RSpec, then when we go to Rails 5, we're going to have to upgrade RSpec because it's a major Rails version change. And then we're going to lose these. So I feel like we need to deal with them now. Yeah, so the auto run change seems to be involved in making the deprecation warnings go to a different IO stream. I wonder how you're supposed to. Oh, raise errors for deprecations is on for RSpec. So I bet the auto run is messing it up. So this is actually based on this configuration, we expect it to error.
It's interesting that including auto run makes it not error.
Yeah, I think it's probably has to do with the IO stream. So it's being messed up, so it's not handling the deprecation as errors properly. That's my guess. So at this point, we can upgrade email spec. Hold on one sec. I should commit first. Okay. App and spec. So I've been running into a lot of gems, Joe and Akshith, where we do this, and what we find is that that gem didn't have a good upper bound set on its dependencies because they didn't exist yet, and not everything uses semver, I think, is part of the problem too. And so we'll do a gem like this, and it will be like, well, I know you're using RSpec Rails, but I can, and it's hard coded to 3.2, but I can go all the way to the current version of email spec, and then it breaks because it doesn't have a good upper bound. See, in this case, for example, it's jumping all the way to from 1.4 to 2.2. So I see that, and then I become worried that it's not actually going to work because it went too far. But let's see. I think actually the spec is not using the I might be running the wrong spec is my point.
Do you think it's better to set really strict upper bounds and then people have to wait for the dependency to update? Or is it better to be loose and then just hope that nothing changes too much? Either way can be annoying when you're upgrading.
Yeah, either way is annoying. So that's a good point. I think when it's just like for the next Rails version, you want to be loose because you don't want to run into that problem. But then when there's like 4 Rails versions after that, then you end up being broken. So maybe, again, the answer is upgrade your Rails sooner than every 10 years. So we're getting the deprecation warnings from email spec still. And we have auto run remove, so we're now getting them as failures.
Is it maybe actually Capybara RSpec that needs to be updated?
Oh yeah, I wasn't paying it. Yeah, so the first one, you're right, Joe. I wasn't paying it close enough attention because I was talking too much. So these ones we're getting now aren't about the email spec matchers. They're about have text. And we are went back in Rails 4, I think we had to put this upper bound or this fixed version on Capybara because Capybara was jumping way too high in version numbers and being completely broken. So what we've been doing is we go to Ruby gems. We look up Rails. Oops. And we look at the date of when the version of Rails. I went too far. So 4.2 came out in December of 2014. So we're talking 2014, 2015. And then we go over to
It's like archaeology.
yeah. So we are currently on 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, up to 2.5 are all right around this area. I remember from doing it before, Capybara is going to go all the way to 3 dot something if we just let it upgrade. So we'll just pick what seems like a reasonable version, 2.5. Actually, let's see 2.4.4. It looks like all of the deprecation warnings are now have text. Yeah.
This feels like a silly question, but how did you pick between the two? Between 2.5? Because my instinct would have been 2.5, and I was like, great, he's gonna pick that one, and then you didn't.
Because after 2.4.4, it starts going 2.5, 2.6, and there's like a long time there. It just sort of like pushed me to being this one.
Mm-hmm.
So we were upgraded fine, and only minimal things changed, which makes me feel good.
One way I've tried to do that is in the gem file, I'll specify a sem for like capybara 2.x and then tell bundle to update. It updates a little bit more, but for gems that are pretty respectful of semantic versioning. So, I mean, not Rails, but capybara, I think so. Usually it doesn't break.
Yeah. Okay, so we got rid of the warning. If we want, we can do that just to see what happens. So, how would you specify that? You'd do
just
this?
like that, but yeah. And it was 2.2 before, right?
Yeah. So like this.
Yeah, and then do an update.
So now we're not letting Capybara go to versions of 3 that start in 3, but it will go to any versions that start in 2 dot. So it'll jump up to, I think there was a lot, if I remember right. Yeah, 2.18. Yep. Let's see if it worked. I've got a good feeling about this, actually, and part of the reason why I have a good feeling is because upgrading that didn't upgrade a whole bunch of other things, and if I remember right, that was part of the problem before.
When you see rack get upgraded, you always know you're in trouble.
Right. Okay, that's good.
One of the things I like about using the semantic version approach is you can be kind of blunt later when you have the same problem. You just run bundle update again, and it'll try to go to the latest. Like in this case, this came out 8 years ago, so it's not going to do anything. But in a real world scenario, if you're upgrading incrementally, the next time you upgrade, you can probably just do bundle update and it'll fix it.
Yeah. The other thing that I was running into early on, or I think we're a little bit past it now, but it was originally 2.0, Ruby 2.0, and a lot of things were just not working on a newer on that older version of Ruby, and so they were going up and then breaking on the version of Ruby that was there. Cool.
That was around when the named arguments changed, right? Like Ruby 2 point something.
So 2 point something. I don't remember. Yeah. 2.9, I think.
Oh, really? I was going to say like 2.2.
Oh, no. Yeah, you're probably right. 2 dot something. Okay. Okay, so we upgraded Capybara, we upgraded that, and we got rid of all of our deprecation warnings and errors. There is this thing about top level constant mutex referenced by thread mutex, which is coming from test unit. I don't know how concerned to be about that. I'm going to choose not to be concerned about it right now. Does that sound good to both of you?
Yep.
It's a good life view, really. Choose not to be concerned.
Okay, we're at Rails 4.2. All of our deprecation warnings are gone. All of our errors are gone. And so now we can go to Rails and we can jump up to Rails 5. Latest version.
So you can do the same thing here if you want, as do like semantic version 5.0. I think you do have to do 5.0.0 or it might do 5.1.
You're right. Yeah. Thanks. So when you do bundle update, I could have just done bundle there. I didn't need to say bundle update Rails.
No, it doesn't update by default. By default, it will just install the exact versions in the lock file. If you want the lock file to change, you need to update.
Okay. What you definitely don't want to do is bundle update with nothing, because that would
be anarchy. Or you could just choose not to be concerned.
There's a certain point at which you need to be concerned because everything is broken. So Dave is saying keyword args are a fun upgrade. So we were stumped. We couldn't remember what version that change happened in. So if someone wants to look it up and find out, that'd be fun to know. Oh, that's interesting. Bundle could not find compatible versions for Action Pack. So Rails 5.0.0 was resolved to 5.0.1.rc1.
That's a surprise to me.
Yeah. Oh, 5.0.7.
I didn't think it would do release candidates by default.
This, yeah, but also that this will definitely go to 5.1.
Right. Or 5.2 even. Who knows?
Even. Anything. Let's just do this.
Why don't you just tell me the version?
So what I'm expecting with this jump from 4.2 to 5 is that so previously none of these versions were hard coded here. I'm expecting we're going to start to run into trouble with some of these because they're no longer resolvable with Rails 5.
I think you're going to have to update Capybara.
So I'm seeing Nokogiri. Did we have? Yeah, but that's not even in here. Clearance was resolved to 1.7, but that depends on Rails greater than 3.1. That's okay. bundler could not find compatible versions for gem Ruby.
I think that's what it means to say.
That's funny. Okay, so we are, let's go to our Rails compatibility table. I think we're going to need to, in order to go to 5, we need to be at 2.2.2 or greater. The recommended version is 2.4, but we are at 2.2.2. Okay.
There's one line on here that's saying it needs to be Ruby 2.3.0 or greater.
Oh, where did you see that?
Right at the bottom, right above that last one.
Oh, Capybara, XPath, Nokogiri is depending on. Okay. Yep. I always am reluctant to. So in theory, if we're going to be good about this, what we need to do is, okay, we've identified that we need to increment our version of Ruby. So we need to back out and go back to the version of Rails. And
Because
then
you
we
wanna
need
try
to
and
increment the
update it one at
version
a
of
time.
Ruby, make sure everything is working well. So we're isolating the variables here. What were you saying, Joe?
You want to update one at a time, Ruby, then Rails.
Right. So I've pre-installed a bunch of versions of Ruby. Yeah, we ended up at some point with both of these.
Doesn't the gem file usually have a Ruby version in it?
At some point, I think so it's in the lock file, I think. Huh. But the answer is yes. That is what I would expect to see at some point. I always forget what the syntax is. Is it use Ruby? Nope.
ASTF install, probably.
I already have it installed.
It should. You can do local. I think
that's what it is.
Yep.
And then ASDF reshim.
Are we jumping from 2.2 to 2.5? Because we don't have 2.3.
I have 2.4 as well, but I have a good feeling about it for some reason. I don't know why.
I'm here for it. It's fun.
Okay, so without making any changes except the Ruby version, we're going to run.
You'll have to rebundle, right?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
You need to install bundler itself, probably.
At some point, bundler gets installed with Ruby, right?
It does, yes.
Yeah.
I have to guess every time I write a Docker file for whatever version of Ruby somebody is using.
It's taking uncomfortably long. yeah, Ruby-v printed out 2.5.9.
If you haven't run these binaries before, it probably has to cross-compile them all now, right? Because you're using an emulator.
As far as I understand it, this is a full emulated x86 instance. So it shouldn't cross-compile anything. It's emulating x86. But you're right, I haven't run anything on this version of Ruby before except the Ruby command that I just ran. I'm going to just want to check something. So okay. So let's, instead of (2.4.10), let's go back. And reshim Ruby. I don't know why it would have been taking so long to install bundler, so I'm worried that something is wrong. So we've got that.
What if you just run gem dash dash version? Is there something weird going on with the gem command? Looks good.
Another option is that it is really just going this slowly, which seems odd. It's actually time for, or a little over time for a break, actually. So we can take a break, let that run, and then we'll come back. We'll take a 5-minute break, everybody. And my favorite, no, let's do into space. See you in 5. Welcome back, Joe. So
It's not the error expected to see.
no. So what's actually happening is just gem install bundler is trying to install. This is the latest version of bundler. And so I was going to install a specific version. So I checked what version we had in 2.2 is 1.17. And I was just about to click through like one of these to see whether the version dependency is listed. Required Ruby version is greater than 2.3. I'll look for one that is greater than 2.4. Okay, I jumped too far. Okay, so the required Ruby versions go from 2.3. Welcome back, Akshith. Welcome back, everybody. Required Ruby versions jump from 2.3 to 2.6 at this version. So actually it churned for a while, and then it said that it couldn't install the version of bundler it was trying to install, but it was trying to go up all the way to basically the latest version of bundler.
Oh, that makes sense.
Requires, well, I don't know why it's doing that. You would think that it would look at the Ruby dependencies
and like automatically pick the one that would possibly actually work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But maybe Gem doesn't do that, and we're just so used to bundler resolving the version dependencies.
Yeah, I think Gem just installs the latest version.
So before the break, we asked what version does the keyword arguments come into play. Dave is saying he thinks it's 2.7. So we'll see. I did end up going back to Ruby 2.4 in the process of doing things. I got nervous when we ran into the problem. I got nervous about going all the way to 2.5.
Maybe I'm being. Yeah. I think we could still do it. I feel good.
Well, it takes this long to install bundler. To be tentative about switching Ruby versions willy-nilly. I don't know why this is taking so long. I mean, when it was bundling and installing Rails and everything, that was going perfectly fine.
Doesn't tell us what it's thinking about.
No, we can do verbose on it. But now I feel like some cost here. We just have to wait.
You could do it in another terminal tab. See how good those mutexes are.
I'm not going to risk it. I feel like I'm on top of a house of cards here. Okay, it's finally fetching something. Amazing. So it is literally telling us about the bug that any scripts that use gem install bundler will break as soon as bundler drops support for your Ruby version. Please upgrade Ruby gems to avoid future breakage and silence this warning. What am I supposed to do with gem update system 3.2.3? But
that may take about 20 minutes.
Yes. But your Ruby gem, so any scripts that use gem will break as soon as bundler drops support for your Ruby version, but we're going to upgrade Ruby versions anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like
this is a warning for your next Ruby Rails upgrade rather than for this one.
Yeah, but each version of Ruby has a new version of gem, so we shouldn't hit that again. Nokogiri is the more complicated compilation stuff with dependencies that fails across Ruby versions. So I'm seeing it stop here and I'm holding my breath. Not literally, just figuratively holding my breath. So let me ask both of you a completely unrelated question, except related to holding breath. So we were in Denver on a team retreat a few weeks ago, and we went on a tour into the Rocky Mountains, and the tour guide was driving the bus that we were in, and there's a lot of tunnels as you go through the mountains. And Sally, who's a member of our team and has been on the stream, and the tour driver started it, but Sally said it was totally a thing. It was to hold your breath as you go through the tunnel and see if you can hold your breath that long. And I have never heard of that before. Have either of you ever heard of that?
Never heard of that.
I've never heard of it, but I'm definitely going to start doing it.
What I have heard of is when you're driving by a graveyard, lifting your feet up so they don't touch the floor of the car. Have either of you ever heard of that?
I've heard of holding your breath when you go by a graveyard. So I think what I'm going to do is next time I go through a tunnel, I'm going to lift my feet up.
Okay, good.
No, I've never heard of the graveyard one, but I feel like we have in Indian culture and Hindu culture, there's a lot of different things with like feet and them being unclean and just what they can touch and what they can't touch. And I feel like there's definitely something there that I'm just not familiar with anymore.
So anyway, that was holding my breath. Anybody have anything else to share?
I see that the Ruby gem status says service under maintenance. Doesn't say anything else, but maybe that explains why things are a little slow.
Wait, Mina said, Is this true, Mina? Is this actually the explanation for it? Or is this a joke? Oh, we made it past Noko Gary. Look at that. Mina, you need to tell me whether that was a joke or not, because now I'm concerned. Mina says that's what they've heard and like it. Okay. So, Joe, you missed it. This last week, we really couldn't figure out this weird problem. It seemed like this class called email validator, which was implemented in the example app, wasn't being called at all. No errors, no nothing. It just, no matter what we would do to change the class, it wouldn't work, and none of the specs were working. And it took us a really long time to figure out that clearance now includes an email validator gem that it wasn't included when we included clearance in in the version of clearance that was there when the book was written. And so none of that code was worried, but early on in trying to figure it out, we looked, does email validator, like, is that a thing that a gem provides? And we saw, oh yeah, it's the email validator gem, but we're not including that gem. Eventually we tracked it down, but it was really had us stumped for a little while.
The Zen of Python says namespaces are one honking great idea. We should do more of those.
Part of the reason why we had trouble tracking it down is because we were in the middle of the Rails upgrade, and we were just so focused on like, these failures are because Rails changed how custom validators work. And that wasn't at all the case. Rails hadn't changed how custom validators worked, but we were just so focused on that it took us a while to figure out and look for other alternatives. So while this is running, why don't we talk a little bit about mission control and the work that you're doing there with, it's been a journey for both of you over the last couple of years, sort of moving from Rails development more to infrastructure and site reliability engineering. How's that been?
It's been fun for me. I always like playing with stuff that's actually in production. We touch Rails a lot, which this doesn't sound good out loud, but I'm going to say it anyway. We touch it differently.
Right. I mean, most of the site reliability engineering work we do and the infrastructure we do is all around hosting Rails, scaling Rails, and making Rails services run well.
Right. And so we've done a lot of SRE for Rails, which is interesting. I feel like every time you do something in the Rails ecosystem, it's unique in some way, and that was also true of metrics. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at the way you would integrate with Prometheus for most things, it's pretty straightforward. But for Rails, because of the peculiar way we do web servers with things like Puma and Unicorn and the copy on write forking, it makes it surprisingly complex to just expose an endpoint with your metrics. Mm-hmm. So that was fun. It was a lowercase f.
What about you, Akshith? How has it been?
Yeah, it's been fun with the capital F. It's got kind of like the opposite. I feel like we kind of have the opposite interesting problem of what we're seeing today, where with Ruby and Rails, a lot of things are like solved is the wrong word, but like you can go to Stack Overflow and like be like, oh, this is how everyone does this problem. Whereas with SRE and DevOps, it feels like so many things are so new and still being in like very, very active development right now. Like so many things that we're working with are just like, how do people do this? There's not one way. So we just have to pick the way that makes the most sense for our team. And then also for like each client that we work on, like you can write a controller in like in a lot of ways, but like one like good way you can't really do that as much for DevOps. Like that's been fun to figure out.
Is that just because things are new, or is it because it's like inherently fractured because everyone's coming to it with all different languages and servers and all that stuff?
I think it's both. Yeah. I feel like if we were like 10 years further out, the like Ruby, Rails, Kubernetes area would be covered pretty well. So like part of it's definitely that it's new, and then part of it is like, yeah, like these tools are being built for different things, like Joe was saying. So as we're trying to plug them into Rails, like there's that's fun with the lowercase f.
I think there's an element of fracturing because people don't see the value in not fracturing in a lot of communities. Like it seems desirable to have things be very customizable and bespoke. Whereas I feel like the Rails community seeks to establish norms and conventions much more aggressively than other communities. So like as we progress through this Rails thing, more and more things get standardized. Like there used to be a bunch of ways to render templates outside controllers, and they just made one way. But it doesn't feel to me like other communities do that as proactively. And so like DevOps is not that new, but there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. And it doesn't seem like people generally view that as a problem.
So what are we doing? I mean, like in general, actually, I think, was it you, Joe, who said to me the other day that Rails is going to incorporate a Docker file into Rails new?
Yeah, I forget what the status is of that, but there was at least a pull request on Rails to have it include a Docker file.
I think that might have been, yeah, that came out today. 7.1.
So that's in 7.1. What does that really get at? I guess it standardizes it so that it's there, right? And becomes a place where you can build upon.
I think also by having it be in the default, it will push more people towards using that style of building your application image. Like I think most people in Rails are beyond the VM era now, but there are a lot of different ways of shipping Rails code to a container. And I think by including a Docker file, they're standardizing on the OCI via Docker file recipe approach. And it'll mean that there's more momentum for that in Rails, which I think is a good thing. I think of all the approaches for building a container image, that is the most straightforward and reliable way. And it will take some guesswork out. It'll provide a place for people to collaborate on what a Rails Docker file should look like. And so, for example, figuring out, do I install Bundler? Do I not install Bundler? That'll be solved once in the Rails Docker file, ideally. And then we won't think about it anymore.
Well, SASC is finally done compiling, so we're moving along now. We're compiling thin. Compiling, I was amazed that this emulator worked as well as it did. Compiling is definitely the slowest thing on it, though. Like when you're just running Ruby or specs or whatever, seems to be pretty usable. but this is really slow.
I wonder if code spaces or something would be good for this. Like, I wonder if they support that version of Ruby.
That's a good question. Would code spaces support a completely unsupported version of Ruby? I don't know. I haven't really used code spaces much. Can you tell it what version of Ruby to use? You must be able to.
I don't know how dependencies work in code spaces.
Mm.
I actually have no idea what I'm talking about. It was just an idea that was interesting to me. I haven't seen thin in a while.
Yeah. Well,
I
it
wonder
goes
why
away at
that's
some point, right? And becomes and is swapped out for Puma.
by default. If you
Yeah.
make a new Rails application, I don't know if upgrading Rails will then Puma you.
Well, thin's not. Oh, it's in here. That's a good point. I wonder what Wait, what is Puma the default in Rails? Puma is shipped with Rails. Why it wasn't Unicorn?
Yeah, I think everything moved to Puma.
Okay. Just wondering what we're including thin there.
I don't think Puma existed when we wrote this. I think it was thin or Unicorn.
Yeah, totally.
It might not depend on Puma because it's going to add Puma to your dependencies when it generates the application, but Rails itself doesn't use Puma.
Well, that's a question to write in my notes. Is at what point can we remove thin from the gem file?
I'm gonna go back a little bit in the conversation to the what we do like mission control that I think is interesting in regards to Rails, because so much of what we do is related to observability and metrics. I think whenever a team is hitting scaling problems, like it feels like they naturally like ask us in Slack, like how do we look at this or what do we do? Like what are the recommendations? And that's been like a very fun recent change. I don't know how you feel, Joe.
People have been asking me those questions for a long time.
Well, speaking of questions, Dave asked whether you've spent any time with inference infrastructure. Have either of you?
I spent some time, like specifically I've used SageMaker, but I haven't done a lot of it.
Have you? So what, for those of people who are watching and don't know what this is about, what's it about?
SageMaker is a managed machine learning solution from AWS. So it's a AWS specific way of doing things like Jupyter notebooks or setting up data science environments within your cloud environment. So you can run things in your VPC, connect to your database, and so on, and it'll manage a lot of the hardware provisioning.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like a lot of the my recent experience with AI things, people have shifted more towards using APIs versus hosting
Right.
machine learning instances, but both are still valid. But in the API case, there's not as much infrastructure.
I am really curious how much that will change over the next couple of years, because I feel like the reason people do that is they use OpenAI's API right now.
Right.
That's like the main go-to one. But I
And then
feel
there's
like
some
we're
enterprise hosting things as well, and like Hugging Face has their, I forget, they have a name for it, but their infrastructure. It might just be called infrastructure.
yeah. And I wonder, like, as those models get better, and people are just like, we might not get the most accurate output, but we're not sending anything anywhere, or we're not sending it anywhere that we don't control.
Right. Well, I think that is, there's a lot of different reasons why you would want to do that ultimately. But also ultimately, like, I would rather use an open source solution than a closed source solution for anything. And so I'm going to, as a developer, continually be pushing to try to use something that I not only have complete control over, but that's open source.
I do think it'll eventually swing back to more running things in your own infrastructure because things tend to go back and forth. But I'll be curious to see if there's some big open source thing that becomes predominant, the way like Spark was for a while and data engineering, or will it be like AWS and Azure make proprietary APIs and people start using those APIs within their own cloud infrastructure?
Right. Well, this is still, thanks, Dave, for the question. We appreciate it. This is still on thin, which I'm a little surprised by. So if you have any other questions related to this or anything else, definitely drop them in the chat so we can take a moment to answer them. The Rails compatibility table, I noticed we might have run into problems with that Ruby version that we were trying, because if you see, it says it's less than 2.5.0, and the one we were doing was, I think, 2.5.9. So we may have actually run into problems there for some reason. It's a weird thing, though, that would be that way.
I was curious and read a little bit about dependencies and code spaces, and it looks like it's Docker based. So as long as we could find a Docker image for that version of Ruby, you could run a code space using it. I don't know how much faster that would be, but
it probably would be faster because it is an actual instance of Intel, I assume. Well, I can. This wasn't taking this long before, so I'm wondering whether. Well, see, it already fetched thin, so it says it's installing it. But like that gem install was also super slow for bundler. And you said Ruby Gems is under maintenance now.
That's what it said before.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether there's something else going on that's slowing things down underneath the hood there. Because we did a Ruby upgrade with a complete install across the whole bundle before, and it was no way it was this slow.
I just did gem install bundler local and it was very fast.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I'm looking at the status page for it. It's like service under maintenance. I think there's one thing, which is Fastly in London. So I don't think that's affecting this.
Are you in London, Chad?
No, I'm not in London. So. At this point, I don't want to stop it because it's probably going to work. It's just going really slowly. But I suppose we could try removing thin from the gen file and seeing what happens.
Is your CPU working real hard, or it's just chilling there somewhere?
It's just chilling, I think. It's 50% idle. I can't on the fly give the instance more resources. Here's the instance of QEMU. So it's using
a core.
Yeah.
Am I the only person that pronounces it Quimu? Just looks like Quimu to me.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, you're not.
I broke
wrong,
Chad.
but I mean, it's clearly EMU is clearly for emulator. So my brain just says Q. Wait, what did I say the first time? Now I'm second. Did I say QMU or did I say QEMU?
The first one.
The first one?
Yeah.
See, there's no logic to that. You might as well just call it Quimu at that point. If you're going to say QEMU. Or no, I said QEMU.
Yeah. Quimu just sounds nicer to me. That's like, if you're thinking about a place you might visit, I'm not going to go to QEMU. Like,
this is totally what people tune in for, I think.
Is that how we pick our tech stack? Is would I go visit this place?
Yes. Yes, it is.
that's at least how I decided to pronounce them. I think it'd be worth just killing it and trying again and see if it's really fast. And if it's not, maybe we just skip thin.
It's been going for so long now, though.
Well, we don't need to use native extensions. We can use WebRick.
Okay. Well, will removing something remove it if you just bundle? I think so, right?
Yeah, if you change the gem file, then it recomputes the dependencies.
Hey, Aji. Aji says, I can't pronounce that out loud. Queemu, and also with you. Okay. Dependencies couldn't be resolved. So so active job is resolving to the right version, or the version we're trying to get. Then that is depending on global ID, which resolved to 0.5.1, which depends on Ruby greater than 2.6. So what? So do we need to lock down the version of global ID? So it's trying to go to 0.5.1. That doesn't even have a Ruby specified.
There's a second error there about simple form that might be.
This, oh, I'm looking at main. You think we should try to resolve that one? And
Yeah, if I get two errors and one of them makes sense and the other one doesn't, sometimes if you fix the one that makes sense, the other one just disappears.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Simple form is one of the ones that we ran into before with a problem of it going too high and breaking everything, and completely breaking.
Now it's too low.
So let's see. Action pack 4.2. So we can try less than 5.2, greater than 4. So we can try 3.5. So remember, what we're doing now is a Ruby upgrade, not a Rails upgrade. And so a gem that we're doing doesn't work on this version of Ruby, which is part of why you want to do the Ruby upgrades separate from the Rails upgrades, because by doing them both at the same time, you potentially end up in a situation where it's broken and can't be resolved in a way that is knowable. or at least a lot harder to find. Okay, so that got rid of that, and now we're saying loofah.
That's that Ruby one again, though.
Yeah.
I think the second one there that says RSpec Rails seems more approachable.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. RSpec Rails 3.2.2. We had just upgraded that. We could do this. So we're coming up on the end of today's session. I just wanted to remind folks we'll be back, me and a group of great thoughtbot developers who live in Europe, West Asia, Africa region. We're going to be early tomorrow, 9 a.m. to noon U.S. Eastern time. And we're in the push here. I really want to complete this upgrade and get to Rails 7 tomorrow. I know it's super optimistic. So if it turns out that we can't get it done in that first slot, I'll be back again in the afternoon, U.S. Eastern time. So fingers crossed. And we definitely should be able to get off this emulator tomorrow because we'll get to a Ruby version that is newer. But maybe I'll also look in code spaces. So am I right or wrong? But it seems to be doing something good this time.
Yeah, it got past resolving dependencies.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that there's that yellow warning that I still don't quite understand that said that the required Ruby version doesn't work. So I wonder if that other required Ruby version error was just bogus.
Yeah. So do you see how active record? So Rails is being upgraded. I thought oh no, we were trying to go to 5. Wait, what? I just confused myself. Weren't we going back to 4.2?
We should be.
When did that change back? Or did I accidentally not go back to the 4.2 branch?
It's definitely on 5 now.
It definitely is. Fortunately, this is all being recorded, so after the fact, someone can go back and see exactly where I messed up, whether I didn't check out that branch or didn't put it back or what.
There was some undoing back and forth with other things as possible.
Yeah.
Got confused there.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't commit the change to Rails.
So maybe you just checked out the branch and it kept your changes because they compatible.
Maybe. I had thought that I went back to 4.2. Okay, well, Joe, Akshith, thanks so much for joining me today. Once again, we didn't quite make as much progress as I was really hoping that we would. But this time, I feel like it mostly was we would have made more progress if these installs were going at a normal speed. So thank you very much for your help.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for watching. We really appreciate it. Once again, we'll be back tomorrow. And, just a reminder, we are available. You can hire thoughtbot to create your Rails app, improve, maintain, scale your existing one, host it, help with hosting on AWS, and to do your Rails and Ruby upgrades. So if you want to get in touch, you can do that at thoughtbot.com. And we'll see you back tomorrow. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye.